Before returning to the designer surface to show you how to organize and colorize entities, I want to be sure you're familiar with the table mappings. What you've seen so far in the designer is referred to as the conceptual model, and it's what you'll work with in your application. But that XML I showed you earlier contains more than just the XML that represents this model. It also contains an XML representation of the database schema, which is in this storage model section, and another set of XML that tells Entity Framework how to get from your entities and their properties to the database tables and columns. This is called the mapping section. And the mappings are what Entity Framework uses for executing queries, returning query results, and performing updates to the database. The whole kit and caboodle of the conceptual model, database model, and mappings is referred to as the model metadata. But you don't have to blind yourself with XML in order to see how that's set up. There's a table mapping viewer in the designer. One way to get to it is by right-clicking any entity in the designer and choosing table mapping. Here you can see what database table the entity maps to and each column that maps to a property in that entity. Because I reverse engineered directly from the database and I haven't done any customizations, the mappings are really straightforward. Here, the entity is a direct reflection of the database table, but that's just the default. There's so much you can do to customize the model and change how it maps to the database. You can make a change as simple as changing the name of a property in the entity, and you can see right away the mapping details updated. The designer understands that the property still maps to the same column, even though I changed the name of the property. Don't miss this new designer feature that we got in Visual Studio 2012. You can reorder properties to your liking. We used to have to do this in the XML, which was not so much fun. You can't drag properties around. You'll have to use the context menu. Just right-click a property and you'll find this new Move Property section, which has a number of ways you can move a property. I'd rather have the last name be above first name in my customer entity, so I'll just move it up. And you can use undo to revert these changes if you need to. There's a slew of other things you can do, from creating inheritance hierarchies to merging tables into a single entity. There's a full 2-hour course on customizing your model in the designer that I did for Visual Studio 2010 and Entity Framework 4. While there have been improvements to the designer in Visual Studio 2012, most of the customization features remain the same, so I'll point you to that course to learn the ins and outs of customizing the model once you've created it. That way, I can focus on the new features of the designer here.